Have you ever felt like the world is changing at an incredible pace? It seems like every day there's a new headline about a major global shift, a new power player on the scene, or a new economic crisis brewing. If you've been wondering what's really going on behind the scenes, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to unravel the complex story of our shifting global order, moving from a world dominated by one superpower to a much more complicated, multipolar landscape. And we'll see how key figures, like former Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, are not just observing these changes but actively shaping them. Let's rewind a bit. For decades after the Cold War, we lived in what's often called a unipolar world. The United States stood as the undisputed global leader. Its military was unmatched, its economy was the engine of global growth, and the US dollar was the lifeblood of international trade. Think about it. Almost every major international transaction, from oil to coffee beans, was priced and settled in dollars. This system, often called the petrodollar system, gave the US immense economic and political leverage. If a country stepped out of line, the US could use financial sanctions, effectively cutting them off from the global economy. This was the era of American hegemony, a time when Washington's influence was felt in every corner of the globe. But, as history teaches us, nothing lasts forever. Cracks in this unipolar foundation began to appear. The 2008 financial crisis was a major wake-up call. It started in the US housing market but quickly cascaded into a global economic meltdown. For many countries, this was a stark reminder of the risks of being so heavily dependent on the American financial system. Suddenly, the idea of de-dollarization, or moving away from the US dollar, went from a fringe economic theory to a serious topic of discussion in finance ministries around the world. Nations began to wonder if there was a better, more stable way to manage the global economy. Simultaneously, another monumental shift was happening: the incredible rise of China. In just a few decades, China transformed itself from a developing nation into the world's second-largest economy. It became the world's factory, a manufacturing powerhouse that reshaped global supply chains. But Beijing's ambitions didn't stop there. Through initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, China started investing trillions of dollars in infrastructure projects across Asia, Africa, and Europe, building new trade routes and expanding its sphere of influence. This wasn't just about building roads and ports. It was a strategic move to create a new, Sinocentric economic order. This brings us to the concept of a multipolar world. Instead of one dominant power, we're now seeing multiple centers of influence emerging. The United States is still a major player, of course, but it now shares the stage with China, the European Union, a resurgent Russia, and rising regional powers like India, Brazil, and South Africa. Each of these actors has its own interests, its own ambitions, and its own vision for the future. This creates a much more dynamic and, frankly, more unpredictable global environment. Alliances are shifting, old rivalries are resurfacing, and new competitions are emerging over everything from technology and trade to resources and territory. Now, let's talk about Mark Carney. Why is he such an important figure in this story? Carney is not your typical central banker. With experience leading the central banks of both Canada and the UK, and with a senior role at Goldman Sachs, he has a unique insider's view of the global financial system. He's seen its strengths and, more importantly, its weaknesses. Back in 2019, at the annual gathering of central bankers in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Carney dropped a bombshell. He delivered a speech that sent shockwaves through the financial world. He argued that the US dollar's dominance was no longer sustainable and that it was contributing to global instability. Carney's argument was powerful. He pointed out that the dollar-centric system creates a domineering effect. When the US Federal Reserve makes decisions about its own economy, like raising or lowering interest rates, those decisions have a massive ripple effect across the entire globe, often with negative consequences for developing economies. He proposed a radical idea: The world should move towards a new international monetary system, one not based on a single national currency. He suggested creating a synthetic hegemonic currency, a digital currency backed by a basket of goods or a group of other major currencies. Think of it like a global version of Facebook's Libra project, but managed by central banks. This, he argued, would create a more stable, equitable, and multipolar financial system. What Carney was essentially doing was giving a voice to the growing anxieties of many countries. He was articulating a vision for a world where economic power was more distributed, where no single nation could hold the global economy hostage. This wasn't just a technical proposal. It was a deeply political statement about the future of global governance. His words resonated because they tapped into a widespread desire for change. The old system, which had served the world for decades, was showing its age. So, where does this leave us? The transition to a multipolar world is well underway, and it's happening on multiple fronts. Economically, we're seeing the rise of new institutions that challenge the post-war Western-led order. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa have established their own new development bank as an alternative to the World Bank and the IMF. Many countries are also increasing their gold reserves and exploring bilateral trade agreements that bypass the US dollar altogether. China's cross-border interbank payment system, or CIPS, is being developed as a potential alternative to the SWIFT system, which is the main network for international financial messaging. Politically, the landscape is just as fragmented. The recent conflicts and geopolitical tensions have accelerated this process. We're seeing the formation of new alliances and blocs, each vying for influence. The consensus that once defined international relations is fracturing. The United Nations Security Council often finds itself deadlocked, unable to act decisively on major global crises. This lack of a central, coordinating authority means that regional conflicts can escalate more easily, and global challenges like climate change and pandemics become much harder to address. This new multipolar era is filled with both opportunities and risks. On one hand, a more distributed system could be more democratic and resilient. It could give a greater voice to emerging economies and lead to more balanced global development. It could spur innovation as different economic models compete. But, on the other hand, it could also lead to greater instability, rivalry, and conflict. Without a clear leader or a shared set of rules, the world could become a more dangerous place. We could see a rise in protectionism, trade wars, and a retreat from the global cooperation that has, for all its flaws, brought unprecedented prosperity to many parts of the world over the past half-century. So, what should we be watching for? Keep an eye on the big currency trends. Will the dollar's share of global reserves continue to decline? Will China's yuan gain more traction internationally? Pay attention to the major geopolitical alignments. Are new military or economic blocs forming? And listen to what influential figures like Mark Carney are saying. Their proposals offer a glimpse into the future that powerful institutions are planning for. They are not just predicting the future, they are actively trying to build it. The blueprint for a new world order is being drafted right now in the halls of central banks, in government ministries, and at international summits. The journey from a unipolar to a multipolar world is one of the most significant transformations of our lifetime. It's a complex, messy, and often confusing process. But understanding these deep currents is essential if we want to make sense of the headlines and navigate the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century. The world our children and grandchildren inherit will look very different from the one we grew up in. The great game of global power is changing, and the final outcome is still very much in play. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into our changing world. If you found this analysis helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think the future of the global order looks like? Until next time.